This is my video check-in for week 11 of The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. This week is called Recovering a Sense of Autonomy. This week we focus on our artistic autonomy. We examine the ongoing ways in which we must nurture and accept ourselves as artists. We explore the behaviors that can strengthen our spiritual base and, therefore, our creative power. We take a special look at the ways in which success must be handled in order that we not sabotage our freedom. This week's essay talks a lot about the spiritual practice of art, about self-acceptance, and also accepting the spiritual connection that we might be fostering in our creativity. But she also goes into a little bit more Zen style spirituality of just accepting and moving through and being at peace with anything that comes our way. And also synchronicity. And this is something that she's revisited repeatedly throughout the course. The tasks this week do go over a lot of the spiritual practices. There's 10 tasks. We're back to doing 10 tasks this week. The last 3 are definitely the more spiritual of the tasks, and funnily enough, they're the 3 that I didn't do. Task 3 is the heavy-hitting task for this week, where you're asked to write out 7 different life areas. They are health, possessions, leisure, relationships, creativity, career, and spirituality. Under each of these headings, you're asked to write 10 things that you would like to see change or move forward or develop. For instance, under the possessions heading, I had written a few goals around minimalism. Minimalism is still something that I'm interested in and I'm trying to pursue, but it is also something that I recognize has a bit of a checkered history. There was a famous modernist architect called Adolf Loos, who wrote a book in 1908 called Ornament and Crime. In this book, he argues that surface decoration covers the true craftsmanship of the object. And in the postmodern era, this was seen as being anti-Indigenous because a lot of Indigenous cultures have used surface decoration throughout all of history as a mark of their culture. Because of this, minimalism was seen as a defunct project. However, in the 21st century, minimalism has moved away from this idea of surface decoration being something that's sinful or used to mask true craftsmanship into a more environmental and spiritual pursuit. Minimalism, I think, these days is distinctly anti-consumeristic and anti-materialistic. And so it is something that I'm choosing to revisit. And I would hereby like to formally distance myself from the work of Adolf Loos. I don't think that surface decoration is something that's sinful. I'm actually not against surface decoration at all. It's about the overwhelming need for possessions that I'm questioning at the moment. This week, I was also very interested in exploring Metamodernism. Metamodernism is the movement that comes after postmodernism that essentially is the critique of the critique. Modernism developed with the advent of the Industrial Revolution and brought with it a whole lot of new ideas. Some of those ideas weren't great. Postmodernism developed in line with a lot of technology, but also coincided with the civil rights movement. There was a lot of good that postmodernism did, but an imperfect system left us without grand narratives and sort of like a very pessimistic and nihilistic worldview. Metamodernism revisits a lot of modern ideas and also postmodern ideas, oscillating between the two, but ultimately has a much more positive outlook on life. A good example of a metamodern narrative would be the film Everything Everywhere All at Once, which has this overwhelming layering and complexity of narratives, but at the very end of the film, they admit, yes, it is all meaningless, and what is the point? But I'm here with you. I'm going to experience this meaninglessness with you. And so metamodernism actually has quite a positive narrative. And I think that this is something that I want to include in my work. I actually see it as a bit of an antidote to my own pessimistic nihilism. Perhaps I am still stuck in a postmodern mindset, and I would like to shift towards a metamodern mindset, something a little bit more playful, a little bit more optimistic. So something that I've noticed that the Artist's Way does very well is it sets up activities and tasks that are very much geared towards writing, filmmaking, directing, acting, all of these kinds of things. And I think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that Julia was in that industry. I don't want to critique the Artist's Way as being inappropriate for visual artists, but I think that it isn't the entire picture. The Artist's Way presents some excellent solutions to some big problems, but it isn't an entire solution. You need to look for answers to other problems that you're being faced with. Perhaps the Artist's Way brings those problems to light, but it's not going to give you all the answers. One answer I found to a problem that I'd been facing was a practice called Jungian Drawing. God. Well, that was very annoying. The entire recording just went dead. Anyway, I'm not going to sit here and explain to you the entire process of Jungian drawing, but I will link it below if you are interested. The point of the Jungian drawing is that it has a series of very strict parameters. There's a time base that you work along with. You start out moving through phases. The first phase is sort of 3 minutes of scribbling, and then you choose 3 colors, and then you paint with each of these 3 colors for 3 minutes each. And then once you've sort of moved through these series of phases, then you can paint freely. The idea with it is painting without any restrictions, completely freely, is actually a really terrifying thing. The possibilities of what might come out of that practice are actually overwhelming. And that can actually stop you from creating anything. It's strange to me that this wasn't, I don't think it's listed anywhere in the Artist's Way, but it seems like such an obvious truth. Of course, if you don't have any restrictions, if the possibilities are too endless, of course, you might feel overwhelmed. And that in and of itself can be a block to a visual artist. So ultimately, the point that I'm trying to make is that not all of the solutions are in the Artist's Way, and that it might not be geared towards every creative field exactly. However, you can find those solutions yourself. And yes, I did find a solution to a problem that I was having. I wouldn't have known what that problem was, however, unless I had been doing the Artist's Way. And now I know that it's better to set up parameters for your work. It's really about being overwhelmed by possibilities. The Jungian drawing sets up some really great parameters, and now I know that I feel much more comfortable working within those parameters. That is essentially why I decided to research metamodernism. Metamodernism gives a really great framework, even an antidote for some of the problems that I've been facing throughout these last 3 months of doing the Artist's Way. And minimalism further gives another set of parameters or framework to also be working through. I understand why I'm drawn to it. Actually, I think that it is an avenue for me to enter creative spirituality, because I think that minimalism is really kind of a spiritual practice. And so I have found a solution, I've found a framework, and I've found a way to move forward. And yeah, that's my check-in for week 11. This video is being produced a little bit later than I would have liked. It was my birthday this week. I turned 38, and I also had a cold. so I wasn't really doing all of the activities every day. I'm still trying to work within the 12-week time frame and producing these videos every week. There's just one more to go, and I think, after I do that 12-week video, I might try to do a bit of a summary, or maybe do a check-in 1 month or 3 months after doing the Artist's Way. I think it's been a really good week. Maybe not my favorite week, but I still got a lot out of it. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. What are we gonna do without the Artist's Way? Oh my god.